Hello and welcome. This is my wife, Mary, and I'm Ed, and we are Branch Davidian Seventh-day Adventists. We're excited you're joining us today. We present or expound on a principle or belief related to the SDA Sabbath School Quarterly each week. The Sabbath School lessons for this quarter deal with education. This week's lesson is entitled Jesus as the Master Teacher. Tuesday's lesson focuses on the humility of Jesus. The lesson reads, "The world all too often invites us to exalt ourselves, to boast of our accomplishments. At a manger in Bethlehem and from the Master Teacher, we learn a different lesson, that God's great work of education and salvation is accomplished not by exalting ourselves, but by humbling ourselves before God and becoming servants to others." What situation are you facing even now in which your humbling yourself could give you a powerful opportunity to reflect Christ to others?
Ellen White found it necessary to put the modifying word true in front of the word humility, as she did with a number of other words we have discussed this quarter. That is because, again, we may have a false idea of what humility is. I used to think that humility was to degrade yourself to come down to others. I used to think that Jesus degraded himself to be with us here on earth. But is that what he did?
To be truly humble is to see yourself and others how they really are in material reality. In other words, if you were a really great guitar player, it wouldn't be against humility to see yourself that way. This is true just as much as it is for someone who is a really bad guitar player, seeing themselves as well, being really bad at guitar. To be truly humble is to be accurate about your actual abilities and to see others in the same truthful light. Humility requires us to refrain from skewing our view of reality, either by inflating our picture of ourselves or by deflating it.
False humility, for example, would be to diminish your guitar playing skills even though they are excellent. Humility is just being truthful with where you are in the progression of education in material reality. For example, when Jesus said that among those born of woman there was none greater than John, see Luke 7:28 and Matthew 11:11, he naturally implied that even he wasn't greater than John. And in another instance, he is recorded as saying that we would do and therefore could do even greater things than he did, see John 14:12.
By making these statements, was Jesus exemplifying false humility, or was he telling the truth? And what are the implications of this?
Obviously, Jesus was not threatened by the thought that we would and therefore could do greater things than he had done. He was okay with the fact that he was not greater than John. We are all bound to be at different levels of progression in different aspects of our lives at any given point in time. I'm sure Jesus was not the greatest bread baker of all time or the greatest lyre player ever to grace the face of the earth. Again, humility is just seeing yourself and others as they really are in material reality.
And this is why the incarnation of Jesus is so incredible for humanity. This is what makes the humility of Jesus so incredibly eye-opening for us. For Jesus to humble himself to be with us allows us to see ourselves as heaven really sees us, capable of being compatible citizens of heaven just like they are. For Jesus to become human is an invitation for us to see ourselves as being worthy of his mission, worthy companions to the angels and even to the Father. In other words, heaven sees humanity as having the actual potential to be like them.
When Jesus humbled himself to be with the leper, he was communicating that the leper had just as much value to heaven as he did. In reality, that leper was just as important to God as Jesus was, and had just as much potential to be godlike as Jesus did. Remember this quote from Ellen White on progressive education? She said, "Higher than the highest human thought can reach is God's ideal for his children. Godliness, godlikeness, is the goal to be reached. Before the student there is opened a path of continual progress. He will advance as fast and as far as possible in every branch of true knowledge."
Now, most dictionaries that I have looked at define humble as having a low estimate of one's own importance or to be low in social rank. But through Jesus' humility at the incarnation, Jesus showed us that heaven has a high estimate of our glorious potential.
About true humility, Ellen White said, "Many have considered it a mark of humility to be ignorant and uncultivated. Such persons are deceived as to what constitutes true humility and Christian meekness." And she also said, "To be clothed with humility does not mean that we are to be dwarfs in intellect, deficient in aspiration, and cowardly in our lives, shunning burdens lest we fail to carry them successfully. Real humility fulfills God's purposes by depending upon his strength."
So Ellen tells us that real humility is to fulfill God's purposes. That is a high calling for sure. There is no place in true humility for self-deprecation. We are important to God, and He has a high estimate of our potential. After all, we were made in their image. Now, this is not to say that we should be prideful, because if we are truly humble, we will see others as having importance and potential too, because in reality they do. Additionally, pridefulness confounds our ability to progress, to learn and unlearn things, which, as we have covered in the second study of this series tagged above, would halt our own education in its tracks.
Ellen White said, "While we should not think of ourselves more highly than we ought, the Word of God does not condemn a proper self-respect. As sons and daughters of God, we should have a conscious dignity of character in which pride and self-importance have no part. So when we humble ourselves to serve others, we should serve like Jesus did, seeing those we are serving as having the same value and potential as ourselves. And it is true education from the school above that develops this potential in all of us."
Thank you for staying with us through the entire video. We invite you to visit our website, www.bdsda.com, to learn more about who we are and, just as important, who we are not. Please join us each week as we will continue to offer new and interesting insights for your Sabbath School studies. God bless.
Many blessings.